I'm Haley Mitchell, 29 years old, and until last year, I was bankrolling my entire family's lifestyle with my CFO salary from a Boston tech startup. For 7 years, I paid their mortgage, car payments, and even my brother's failed business ventures. Then came the Thanksgiving when I finally said no to another financial demand. Their response? You're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize for your selfishness. Instead of apologizing, I cut off every dollar they lived on. What followed was both devastating and necessary. I never imagined they would fall so far, so fast without my support. If you've ever been taken advantage of by family, stick around. Before I dive into this emotional roller coaster, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to see more stories about setting boundaries that changed everything. I grew up in Lexington, a charming suburb outside Boston, in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family. My mother Karen, a part-time office manager, ruled our household with strong opinions and stronger expectations. My father Robert, who worked in middle management at an insurance company, preferred avoiding confrontation to standing his ground. And then there was my younger brother Jason, 3 years my junior and undeniably the golden child. From an early age, the family dynamic was crystal clear. Jason could do no wrong, while I was expected to be the responsible one. When he broke a neighbor's window playing baseball, I gave up my babysitting money to help pay for it. When he forgot his science project, I stayed up all night helping him complete it. This pattern wasn't occasional, it was our family operating system. Despite this imbalance, I excelled academically. While Jason struggled through high school with C's and the occasional B, I maintained a 4.0 GPA, captained the debate team, and earned a full scholarship to Northeastern University. My parents attended exactly 2 of my debate competitions throughout high school, but never missed a single one of Jason's mediocre baseball games. Haley's just naturally good at school, my mother would say dismissively when relatives commented on my achievements. Jason needs more support to find his path. College became my escape. I double majored in finance and business administration, worked part-time to cover expenses my scholarship didn't, and graduated with honors. My graduation ceremony was cut short when Jason called with car trouble, causing my parents to leave halfway through. I secured an entry-level financial analyst position at a promising tech startup in Boston. The salary wasn't impressive at first, but the equity options were substantial. I rented a tiny studio apartment with a roommate, lived frugally, and focused on building my career. 3 months after I started my job, the calls began. Haley, the washing machine broke, my mother announced one evening. We need $800 for a new one. I transferred the money without hesitation. Family helps family, right? 2 months later, their car needed repairs. Then their roof started leaking. Each time, I provided the funds, initially viewing these as one-off emergencies. But the emergencies never stopped coming. By my 2nd year of employment, I was paying their cell phone bill every month temporarily. 6 months later, I was covering their car payment too. When they fell behind on their mortgage after my father was briefly furloughed, I stepped in there as well. Just until we get back on our feet, my mother promised. They never did. Meanwhile, Jason had dropped out of community college and was finding himself through a series of entrepreneurial ventures that invariably failed. First, it was dropshipping exotic pets, which ended with legal complications. Next came an attempt at cryptocurrency trading that resulted in substantial losses. Then a food truck that operated for exactly 3 weekends before he lost interest. Each venture required startup capital. Each time, my parents convinced me to invest in Jason's future. You're doing so well, Haley, my mother would say. Don't you want your brother to succeed too? 7 years passed this way. I climbed the corporate ladder from analyst to manager to director and finally to CFO by age 28, an achievement that required incredible dedication and countless 80-hour work weeks. My salary increased dramatically, as did the financial demands from my family. I was now paying their entire mortgage, $2,400 monthly. Both car payments, $850 monthly. All utilities, $400 to $600 monthly. Credit card minimum payments, $1,200 monthly. Various emergency expenses, $1,000 to $3,000 monthly. Jason's apartment rent, $1,700 monthly. Jason's business ventures, $5,000 to $15,000 per attempt. Throughout this time, I delayed my own life goals. I continued sharing an apartment despite being able to afford my own place. I postponed further education. I rarely took vacations. Every extra dollar went to my family or into savings for their next crisis. The turning point began when I met Michael at a finance conference 2 years ago. Smart, kind, and perceptive, he saw through my practiced excuses about why I couldn't join colleagues for dinner or weekend trips. "You're supporting your family, aren't you?" he asked on our third date. Something about his gentle directness cracked my carefully maintained facade. I told him everything, expecting judgment. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about my own dreams and goals. "When was the last time you did something just for yourself, Haley?" I couldn't remember. As our relationship developed, Michael helped me recognize the unhealthy dynamics at play. He never told me what to do but asked questions that led me to my own conclusions. When I received texts from my mother demanding money, he would simply ask, "How does that make you feel?" The answer was always some variation of resentful, angry, and trapped. With Michael's support and a therapist I began seeing, I started setting small boundaries. I required receipts for emergency expenses. I established a monthly budget for family support rather than responding to each demand individually. I declined to fund Jason's fifth business venture, a specialty coffee shop, despite his zero experience in food service. These boundaries were met with emotional manipulation, guilt trips, and occasionally, temporary compliance before reverting to old patterns. My parents became experts at finding ways around my limits, like having my father call instead of my mother when I stopped responding to her demands, or creating increasingly dramatic emergencies that couldn't wait until the next month's budget allocation. By last Thanksgiving, I was supporting them with over $7,000 monthly while Jason hadn't held a job longer than 3 months in his entire adult life. My resentment had reached a breaking point, but years of conditioning made the thought of stopping support terrifying. What kind of daughter would let her parents lose their house? What kind of sister wouldn't help her brother find his purpose? I was trapped in a prison of financial responsibility that I had helped build, one transfer at a time. Thanksgiving last year marked the third time Michael would join my family for a holiday. The previous 2 occasions had been tense but manageable, with Michael witnessing firsthand the dynamic I described but keeping his observations private until we were alone. I spent the morning cooking, not because my mother asked for help, but because I knew from experience that if I didn't prepare multiple dishes myself, there wouldn't be enough food that wasn't overcooked or underseasoned. Michael and I arrived at my parents' suburban home at 1 p.m., carrying 3 side dishes, a pie, and an expensive bottle of wine. Finally, my mother said by way of greeting, taking the food without commenting on it, "Jason's been here since 10 helping me set up." I bit back the observation that helping set up appeared to mean Jason was sprawled on the couch watching football while my mother bustled around the kitchen. Michael squeezed my hand supportively. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mrs. Mitchell," Michael said, handing her the wine. "Thank you for having us." My mother examined the label and nodded with approval. "At least your boyfriend has good taste," she told me, as though I hadn't selected and purchased the wine myself. My father emerged from his den long enough to clap Michael on the shoulder and ask about the Patriots' chances this season before disappearing again. Jason barely looked up from his phone when we entered the living room. "What's up, sis?" he said, not waiting for an answer before returning to his scrolling. "Oh, Michael's here too. Cool." I busied myself in the kitchen, falling into the familiar pattern of completing half-done tasks while my mother criticized my technique. "The potatoes need more milk." "No, not that much." "Why are you stirring them like that?" Meanwhile, I could hear Jason regaling Michael with tales of his latest business idea, a premium dog walking service with digital integration and lifestyle branding. It's a totally untapped market, Jason was saying. People in Boston will pay anything for convenience. I've already got the business plan worked out. Just need about 20 grand for the initial app development and marketing push. My stomach clenched. I knew exactly where this was heading. Dinner itself was a minefield of subtle digs and pointed questions. So, Haley, still at that same company? My mother asked, as though I hadn't recently been promoted to CFO. Yes, Mom. We just closed a successful Series C funding round. We're expanding internationally next quarter. That's nice, dear. Jason might be joining a startup too, as a consultant. They're very interested in his creative vision. I nodded, knowing from experience that this interest likely consisted of a polite LinkedIn message or a friend of a friend mentioning a vague opportunity. Michael, how's your job going? My father asked, making a rare contribution to the conversation. Very well, sir. The law firm just made me junior partner. A lawyer and a finance person, my mother mused. You two must have such boring conversations. Actually, Michael replied smoothly, we're taking sailing lessons together. Haley has a natural talent for it. This was news to my family, who looked collectively surprised that I had interests outside of work and sending them money. Since when do you sail? Jason scoffed. Since 3 months ago, I answered. It's something I've always wanted to try. Must be nice to have all that free time and money, Jason muttered. The comment stung, considering I worked 60-hour weeks while Jason remained perpetually between opportunities. As my mother served dessert, Jason put his plan into action. So, I've been crunching the numbers on this dog walking business, he began, looking directly at me. The app developer needs half up front, but once we're operational, the return on investment will be insane. I'm thinking you could transfer the money next week, and I'll set up a payment plan to pay you back once we're profitable. I noticed he was wearing a new Apple Watch, at least $500 for the model he had, while still owing me $3,000 from his last failed venture. Something inside me finally snapped. No, I said quietly. The table fell silent. What do you mean, no? Jason asked, as though I'd responded in a foreign language. I mean no, I'm not giving you $20,000 for a dog walking app. Jason looked at my mother expectantly, waiting for her to step in as she always did. Haley, my mother said in her warning tone, your brother has put a lot of thought into this business. The least you could do is support his ambitions. I've supported his ambitions to the tune of nearly $80,000 over the past 5 years, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. None of his ventures have returned a single dollar. That's not fair. Jason protested. The cryptocurrency thing would have worked if the market hadn't crashed. And the food truck was making a profit before the health inspector showed up. The health inspector showed up because you weren't following basic food safety protocols, I reminded him. Which I also paid for you to learn and get certified in, by the way. My mother's face hardened. I don't like your attitude, Haley. Just because you got lucky with your job doesn't mean you're better than your brother. He's trying to build something of his own instead of just working for someone else. Michael shifted uncomfortably beside me but remained silent, respecting that this was my battle to fight. It's not luck, Mom. I've worked incredibly hard for every promotion. I've sacrificed my own goals to support this family financially for 7 years. Oh, here we go, Jason rolled his eyes. Saint Haley the martyr, always reminding us of her generosity while holding it over our heads. I've never once brought up the money until today, I said, feeling a strange calm descend over me. But I'm drawing a line. I'm not funding another business that has no plan, no experience behind it, and no accountability. My father finally spoke up, but not to support me. Haley, family helps family. That's how we raised you. Family helps family, I repeated. So when exactly does the help come my direction? When does anyone in this family ask about my dreams or offer to support my goals? We've always supported you, my mother exclaimed. We raised you, put a roof over your head, fed you. That's called being a parent, Mom. It's the basic legal requirement. Don't you dare talk to your mother that way, my father said, finding his voice now that I was the target. This isn't about the money, my mother declared, though it clearly was. This is about your attitude. You've become selfish and cold since you started dating him. She gestured dismissively toward Michael. Leave Michael out of this, I said firmly. He's the first person who's ever encouraged me to think about what I want. Well, what you want seems to be abandoning your family when they need you, Jason spat. I've sent over $300,000 to this family in the past 7 years, I revealed, the number shocking even me as I said it aloud for the first time. How is that abandonment? The table fell silent for a moment as the figure hung in the air. If you had financial problems, you should have come to us, my mother finally said, completely missing the point. Unbelievable, I whispered, pushing back from the table. Michael, I think we should go. Running away from family on Thanksgiving, my mother said, shaking her head dramatically. I raised you better than this. I stood, gathering my purse. I'm not running away. I'm removing myself from a situation where I'm being disrespected and manipulated. As Michael and I moved toward the door, my mother delivered her ultimatum. You're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize for your selfishness, young lady. And don't expect a Christmas invitation either unless you reconsider your brother's business proposal. Michael opened the door for me, and I walked out without looking back, feeling simultaneously like my world was ending and like I could finally breathe. The drive home from my parents' house was silent for the first 10 minutes. Michael kept both hands on the wheel, occasionally glancing at me with concern as I stared out the passenger window, watching suburban houses blur past. Are you okay? He finally asked. I don't know, I answered honestly. I feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience. You stood your ground back there. That took incredible courage. I turned to look at him. Did it? Or was it just selfish? Maybe they're right. Michael shook his head firmly. Haley, demanding basic respect and refusing to fund another doomed business venture isn't selfish. What's happening in your family isn't normal. It's normal for us, I whispered. That doesn't make it right. We drove in silence for another few minutes before I voiced the thought that had been forming since we left. I think I need to stop supporting them completely. Michael nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on the road. I think that might be necessary. But it's entirely your decision, and I'll support whatever you choose. By the time we reached my apartment, my phone had accumulated 17 text messages and 4 voicemails, all from family members, all variations on themes of guilt, anger, and demands for apology. I silenced my phone and spent the remainder of the holiday weekend in a fog, alternating between doubt, grief, and moments of strange, unfamiliar relief. Michael stayed with me, giving me space when I needed it and offering perspective when I asked. On Monday morning, I called my therapist, Dr. Rivera, and scheduled an emergency session for that afternoon. What they're doing is called financial abuse, Dr. Rivera explained after I recounted the Thanksgiving disaster. They've created a dependency and react with emotional manipulation when you try to establish boundaries. But they're my family, I protested weakly. Aren't I supposed to help them? There's a difference between helping and enabling, she replied gently. Helping empowers someone to eventually stand on their own. Enabling perpetuates unhealthy patterns and dependency. Over the next week, through daily therapy sessions and long conversations with Michael, I gained clarity. I wasn't helping my family by funding their lifestyle and poor decisions, I was preventing them from experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. 7 days after Thanksgiving, I made my decision. I would stop all financial support immediately. No warnings, no gradual reduction, no final chances. A clean break. I knew if I warned them, they would escalate their manipulation tactics, potentially wearing down my resolve. They might manufacture emergencies, make promises of change, or increase their attacks. The only way forward was complete financial separation. The implementation required methodical planning. I spent a full day cataloging every financial connection between us. Mortgage payments to Middlesex Bank, $2,400 per month. Car payments to Toyota Financial, $480 per month, and Honda Financial, $370 per month. Credit card minimum payments to 3 different banks, totaling $1,200 per month. Utility automatic payments, gas, electric, water, internet totaling $580 per month. Cell phone family plan, $210 per month. Jason's rent paid directly to his landlord, $1,700 per month. Various subscription services on my credit card, streaming services, meal kit deliveries, etc. Miscellaneous recurring transfers to their checking account, $1,000 per month for groceries and incidentals. In total, I was spending $7,940 every month, nearly 60% of my take-home pay, supporting my family's lifestyle. I systematically dismantled each connection. I called the mortgage company and removed myself as an authorized payer. I contacted the utility companies to remove my payment information. I canceled the automatic transfers from my account. I removed my credit card from all their subscription services. For accounts where I couldn't remove my information remotely, I blocked the charges through my bank. I changed all my passwords and set up two-factor authentication on every financial account. The most difficult call was to Jason's landlord, explaining that I would no longer be covering his rent after the current month. The landlord seemed unsurprised, mentioning that several maintenance requests had been ignored and noise complaints filed. I felt a stab of guilt imagining Jason being evicted, but reminded myself that he was 26 years old, more than old enough to support himself. After 8 hours of calls, emails, and form submissions, I had extracted myself from every financial obligation. The process left me physically exhausted but mentally lighter than I'd felt in years. Next came the digital boundaries. I knew my family would react strongly once they realized what I'd done. I created email filters to send their messages to a separate folder I could check when emotionally prepared. I adjusted my phone settings to silence calls and texts from their numbers without blocking them entirely. I wanted the option to check their messages on my own terms. I also wrote a detailed letter explaining my decision, saving it as a draft. I wasn't ready to send it yet, but writing it helped clarify my thinking. In the letter, I detailed the exact amount I had given them over 7 years, $327,480, the opportunities one had postponed for myself, and the realization that my support wasn't helping them build sustainable lives. The final step was preparing myself emotionally. I took a personal day from work and focused on self-care. I went for a long run along the Charles River, something I rarely had time for despite living in Boston for years. I scheduled a massage, my first in over 2 years. I bought groceries for actual cooking rather than my usual grab-and-go meals between work and family emergencies. That evening, Michael came over with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. "How are you feeling?" he asked as we sat on my small balcony overlooking the city lights. "Terrified," I admitted. "But also, free? Is that terrible to say?" He took my hand. "It's honest. And you're allowed to feel relief when you put down a burden you've been carrying too long. What if they lose everything? What if they can't make the mortgage payment and become homeless? They're adults with jobs, Haley. Your father makes a decent salary. Your mother works part-time. Jason is capable of employment. They survived before you started supporting them, and they can figure it out now." "They'll hate me," I whispered, voicing my deepest fear. "They might be angry," Michael acknowledged. "But that doesn't mean you're wrong. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people we love is to stop protecting them from reality." I leaned my head against his shoulder, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future shaped by my own dreams rather than my family's demands. The storm was coming, but I was finally ready to weather it. The first sign that my family had discovered the financial cutoff came 3 days later. My phone lit up with a text from my mother at 8:17 a.m. while I was in a meeting. Haley, the mortgage payment didn't go through. There must be some mistake with the bank. Call me ASAP. I didn't respond, but my heart raced. This was really happening. By lunchtime, I had 4 more texts from my mother, each progressively less patient. Haley, please call the bank right away. Dad's on hold with them, but they won't talk to him about your payment. The bank says you removed yourself as an authorized payer? There must be some confusion. This isn't funny, Haley. The mortgage is due today. Call me immediately. My father, who rarely texted, sent a single message: your mother is very upset. Please call when you can. I silenced my phone again and focused on work, throwing myself into budget projections for the upcoming quarter. I'd prepared for this moment, but the reality was still jarring. By evening, the voicemails had begun. Haley Elizabeth Mitchell, my mother's voice was tight with controlled anger. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it needs to stop right now. Your father and I raised you better than this. Call me back. The next message, left an hour later, took a different approach. Honey, if you're upset about Thanksgiving, we can talk about it. But punishing the whole family by not paying the mortgage isn't the answer. Please call me. I listened to each message once, then archived them. Jason's contribution came via text around 9 p.m. WTF sis? Mom's freaking out. Fix whatever you did with the bank. I didn't respond to any of them, though each message sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. Dr. Rivera had prepared me for this first phase, the assumption that this was a mistake or temporary protest that would quickly be resolved. Day 4 brought the escalation to anger. I don't know what's gotten into you, my mother's voicemail began, but this behavior is completely unacceptable. We depend on you. Is this because of that boyfriend? Has he been turning you against your family? Jason's approach was more direct. You're being a selfish bitch. Mom's crying every day because of you. My father left a rare voicemail, his voice sounding tired. Haley, please call your mother. I don't know what's going on, but we need to work this out as a family. By the end of the first week, they had discovered that I'd removed myself from all the utilities and canceled the automatic transfers. My mother's tactics shifted to pure manipulation. After everything we've done for you, she sobbed in a voicemail, this is how you repay us? I didn't raise you to abandon your family when they need you. The second week brought attempts to circumvent my boundaries. My mother called my office directly, but I'd already warned my assistant about potential family calls. My aunt, my mother's sister, called to tell me how worried everyone was about my sudden change in personality. My father's email suggested I might be having a nervous breakdown from work stress. Jason took a different approach, showing up at my office building unannounced. Security called up, but I declined to see him. Through the lobby security camera feed my assistant pulled up, I watched him argue with the guard for 15 minutes before finally leaving. That night, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Karen from next door to your parents. Your mother asked me to message you because she thinks you're blocking her. They're in real trouble, Haley. The power was turned off yesterday. I verified through social media that Karen was indeed my parents' neighbor. The power being shut off sent a fresh wave of guilt through me, but I reminded myself that this was the consequence of their choices, not mine. They had income, they had simply never adjusted their spending to match it. 3 weeks in, I received my first communication that wasn't about money or demands. My father sent an email with the subject line, "We need to talk." Haley, I don't know what's happening, but we're falling apart here. Your mother won't admit it, but we've never managed money well. I always assumed we'd figure it out someday, but then you started helping, and it was easier to let you handle it. I know that wasn't fair to you. Can we please talk? Just you and me? It was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from him. I was tempted to respond but decided to maintain my silence for now, filing the email away for future consideration. By the 1-month mark, the reality of their situation had fully set in. Through mutual connections and social media, I learned that they had received a formal notice of mortgage default. Jason had been asked to start paying rent or vacate his apartment. One of their cars, the newer Honda, had been repossessed. They had borrowed money from several friends, already exhausting their social network. My mother had taken on additional hours at her job. Jason had reluctantly accepted a position at a local big-box store. My mother's social media presence, once filled with vacation photos and restaurant check-ins, had gone conspicuously quiet. When she did post, it was vague references to going through a difficult time and learning who your true friends are. Through a mutual friend, I heard that my mother was telling people I had changed since my promotion and was having some kind of breakdown. She implied that my new boyfriend had suspicious influence over me and my finances. The narrative painted her as the concerned mother dealing with a daughter's inexplicable betrayal. Meanwhile, Jason had apparently told his friends that I had promised to fund his dog walking business but had pulled out at the last minute, causing him to lose major investors, which I knew didn't exist. The hardest part was hearing through my father's cousin that my parents were struggling to afford my father's blood pressure medication. For a moment, I almost broke my resolve. I researched patient assistance programs and anonymously sent the information to my father's email, but maintained my financial boundary. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I received a letter, an actual paper letter, from my mother. The handwriting was shaky, the tone desperate. "Haley, I don't know why you've abandoned us, but we're about to lose the house. Whatever we did to upset you, please don't punish us this way. We raised you, loved you, supported your education. How can you watch your family suffer like this? What kind of daughter have you become?" Even in her plea, there was no acknowledgement of their dependence, no recognition of the years I'd supported them. Just more guilt, more obligation, more emotional manipulation. I filed the letter away with all the others. When I shared these communications with Dr. Rivera during our weekly sessions, she helped me recognize the patterns of escalation, manipulation, and the notable absence of any genuine accountability. They're experiencing the natural consequences of their financial behaviors for the first time in years, she explained. This adjustment period is painful but necessary. But what if they really do lose everything? I asked for the 100th time. Then they'll have to make difficult adult decisions, just like everyone else does, she replied calmly. They might need to sell the house and downsize. Your father might need to look for higher paying work. Jason might need to commit to full-time employment. These aren't tragedies, Haley, they're normal life adjustments that your support has been shielding them from. I knew she was right, but watching from afar as my family's financial house of cards collapsed was still agonizing. Even in my anger and resolve, I loved them. I didn't want them to suffer, I just wanted them to stop using me as their financial safety net. 6 months after Thanksgiving, the situation reached its climax. Through a family friend, I learned that foreclosure proceedings had begun on my parents' house. Jason had been evicted from his apartment and had moved back home. My father was interviewing for a new position that would require a longer commute but offered better pay. My mother had taken on a second part-time job on weekends. They were struggling, but they were adapting. They were making the hard choices they had avoided for years while I carried their financial burden. And then came the day I had both dreaded and anticipated. They showed up at my door. The 3 months following my decision to cut financial ties with my family revealed the alarming extent of their dependency. Each week brought new evidence of their financial unraveling, like watching a slow-motion car crash I had set in motion but couldn't stop. Week 1, the mortgage payment was officially late, triggering the bank's automated reminder calls and a late fee of $150. My mother left increasingly frantic voicemails about the banking error that needed my immediate attention. Week 2, the car payments were missed. Honda Financial and Toyota Financial both sent automated payment failure notices to their emails, which I was copied on from previous communications. The minimum payments on all 3 credit cards went unpaid, triggering not only late fees but interest rate increases from 21.99% to 29.99% on their already substantial balances. Week 3, the first utility, electricity, was shut off after missed payments and ignored notices. Through a neighborhood Facebook group I occasionally checked, I saw a post from my mother's friend asking if anyone had a spare generator they could borrow for a few days during an unexpected power issue. My stomach clenched, but I reminded myself this was temporary. They had the means to pay, they simply needed to reprioritize their spending. Week 4, Jason was given notice by his landlord. Without my monthly payments, he had apparently made no effort to cover his own rent. According to a mutual friend, he was telling people he was between apartments while sleeping on my parents' couch. His social media still showed him checking in at expensive restaurants and bars several times that week. By the end of the first month, my parents had borrowed money from 2 sets of friends and my mother's brother, quickly depleting their social safety net. These loans were small, $200 here, $500 there, but revealed how quickly they turned to external support rather than adjusting their own habits. The second month brought more serious consequences. The bank initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings on the house, sending formal notices and calling repeatedly. My father, finally taking action, arranged a meeting with their loan officer to discuss options, but without my income to point to, they had little negotiating leverage. Their newer car, a Honda Accord my mother drove, was repossessed one Tuesday morning. My mother posted a vague Facebook status about criminals in the neighborhood before admitting in the comments that it was actually the finance company who stole her car. The comments section quickly turned uncomfortable as friends realized what had happened, and she deleted the post entirely. Jason, now living with my parents, finally found employment at a nearby Target store. According to his reluctant Instagram post, "Adulting sucks #retail-hell," he was working as a cashier. The position was part-time and barely covered his personal expenses, let alone contributing to the household. The utilities were reconnected after 2 weeks when my parents paid the minimum reinstatement fees, but their cell phone family plan was reduced to the most basic service after multiple missed payments. My mother, who typically posted dozens of times weekly on various social platforms, went conspicuously quiet, likely due to limited data access. 3 months in, mutual friends reported that my mother had taken on additional hours at her office job and had started working weekends at a local department store. My father, whose position at the insurance company had grown comfortable but stagnant over the years, was actively interviewing for higher-paying roles. These were positive steps, but they came only after significant financial pain. Meanwhile, their social narrative about the situation evolved in concerning ways. Through the grapevine, I heard multiple versions of their explanation for the sudden financial crisis. My mother told her close friends I was going through something and had cut them off without warning. My father told his colleagues there had been a temporary misunderstanding about family finances. Jason told anyone who would listen that I had promised to fund his business venture and then pulled the rug out, causing him to lose major opportunities. None of these narratives acknowledged the years of financial dependence or their own responsibility in the situation. Their credit scores, which had been artificially maintained by my timely payments, plummeted. This created a cascading effect, making it harder to negotiate with creditors, refinance their remaining car, or find a landlord willing to rent to them if they lost the house. 4 months after Thanksgiving, I received a particularly difficult update from a family friend who didn't know the full situation. My father had apparently developed stress-related health issues, his blood pressure was dangerously high, and he'd been prescribed additional medication he was struggling to afford. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I researched patient assistance programs from the pharmaceutical company and anonymously sent the information to my father's email, but maintained my financial boundary. 5 months in, the reality of potential homelessness loomed. The foreclosure process in Massachusetts typically takes about 150 days, and they were rapidly approaching that deadline. Through my professional network, I discreetly learned they had attempted to refinance but were denied due to their damaged credit and inconsistent income documentation. My mother, increasingly desperate, had reached out to distant relatives they hadn't spoken to in years. Some sent small amounts of money, but most were dealing with their own financial challenges or were wary of their sudden reappearance after years of silence. At the 6-month mark, their financial situation had reached its nadir. Foreclosure proceedings were actively underway, with a sale date set for the following month. Their remaining car needed major repairs they couldn't afford, making my father's commute to interviews unreliable. Jason's part-time retail position wasn't enough to contribute meaningfully to household expenses. They had exhausted nearly all social and family resources for loans. Credit card debts had been sent to collections after 120 days of non-payment. My mother's second job was causing physical exhaustion but was essential for basic expenses. Utility services were maintained but at minimum levels, with service interruptions whenever payment was late. While their financial situation was dire, something unexpected was happening. They were finally taking responsibility. My father had interviews lined up for better-paying positions. My mother had stopped posting about luxury purchases and vacations on social media. Jason, while still complaining, was actually maintaining his employment longer than any previous job. They were changing, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. The question was whether these changes had come too late to save their home and financial stability. Throughout this period, I maintained my distance but kept informed through mutual connections and occasional public records searches. Each update brought mixed emotions: guilt at their suffering, vindication that my concerns about their financial irresponsibility had been valid, worry about their future, and relief at my own newfound financial and emotional freedom. Michael remained my steadfast support, never judging my family or pressuring me in either direction. "Whatever you decide is the right decision," he would say. "This is your journey." Dr. Rivera helped me process the complex emotions that arose each time I received an update about their situation. "You can have compassion for their struggle while maintaining your boundaries," she reminded me. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." As the 6-month mark approached, I had settled into a new normal. For the first time in my adult life, my financial decisions were truly my own. I had moved into a nicer apartment, started maxing out my retirement contributions, and even booked a vacation with Michael, simple things that had seemed impossible while supporting my family. I had just returned from that vacation, a week in San Diego that had been restorative and free from guilt, when the doorbell rang on a Sunday afternoon. Michael had gone to pick up groceries, and I was alone. Through the peephole, I saw my mother and Jason standing in the hallway. 6 months of distance, 6 months of consequences, 6 months of change, all culminating in this unexpected confrontation at my door. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. I opened the door to find my mother and Jason looking like shadows of their former selves. My mother, usually meticulously put together, wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Jason, who typically dressed in trendy clothes regardless of his financial situation, wore a faded Target polo and jeans with worn knees. Their physical transformation shocked me more than their unexpected appearance at my door. "Haley," my mother said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "May we come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. They entered my new apartment, a place neither of them had visited before, and stood awkwardly in the entryway. "Nice place," Jason muttered, looking around with a mixture of appreciation and resentment. "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "Would you like some water or coffee?" "Water would be fine," my mother answered, following me to the kitchen while Jason remained in the living room, examining my bookshelves. I filled 2 glasses with filtered water, using the mundane task to gather my thoughts. This was the confrontation I'd been simultaneously dreading and preparing for over 6 months. We settled in the living room, my mother and Jason on the couch, me in an armchair across from them. The silence stretched uncomfortably before my mother finally spoke. "You look well," she said, as though we'd simply lost touch rather than experienced a complete family breakdown. "I am well," I confirmed. "How are you both?" My mother's practiced smile faltered. "We've been better, as I'm sure you know." "Why are you here?" I asked, deciding directness was better than pretense. "We're about to lose the house," my mother said, her voice breaking slightly. "The foreclosure auction is scheduled for next week." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it despite everything. "Sorry enough to help?" Jason interjected, earning a sharp look from our mother. "We didn't come to ask for money," she said quickly, though the flicker in her eyes suggested otherwise. We came because we need to understand what happened. After everything we've been through as a family, how could you just cut us off without a word? The familiar surge of guilt rose within me, but I had spent months preparing for this moment with Dr. Rivera. I took a deep breath. I supported this family financially for 7 years, I began calmly. During that time, I put my own life goals on hold while covering not just emergencies, but your entire lifestyle. When I finally set a boundary at Thanksgiving, I was told I was selfish and banned from family gatherings. You refused to help your brother, my mother countered. I refused to invest in another business venture after funding 5 failed attempts, I corrected. That's not the same as refusing to help. So you punished all of us because you were mad at Jason? My mother asked incredulously. This isn't about punishment, I said firmly. This is about recognizing an unhealthy dynamic and changing it. Do you know how much money I've given this family over the past 7 years? They exchanged glances but didn't answer. $178,000, I stated. The precise figure had been calculated with my financial advisor during my own reckoning process. My mother's eyes widened. Jason looked at the floor. That doesn't include the additional $149,000 in business investments for Jason that were never repaid, I continued. That's a total of $327,480. The number hung in the air between us, its magnitude impossible to dismiss. We had no idea it was that much, my mother finally whispered. That's part of the problem, I explained. Money from me became so expected that you stopped seeing it as significant. It was just there, like air, noticed only when it disappeared. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know I messed up with the business stuff. But did you have to cut Mom and Dad off too? They're losing everything. They're losing a house they couldn't afford without my subsidizing it, I pointed out. Dad makes $72,000 a year. Mom works part-time by choice. That's enough for 2 adults to live comfortably if they budget appropriately. We have other expenses, my mother protested weakly. Like what? Credit card debt from living beyond your means? Car payments for vehicles you couldn't afford? My mother's face flushed. You have no right to judge how we spend our money. It became my right when it was my money being spent, I countered. I'm not judging you for wanting nice things. I'm pointing out that expecting me to fund those things indefinitely wasn't sustainable or fair. The conversation lapsed into silence again. Jason stared at his phone as though hoping for an escape, while my mother looked around the apartment, likely noting the modest but comfortable furnishings I'd finally allowed myself to purchase. What do you want from us? She finally asked. I don't want anything from you, I replied. That's the point. For the first time in my adult life, our relationship isn't transactional. Then why agree to see us today? Because despite everything, you're still my family. I don't want to cut you out of my life entirely. I just need our relationship to be healthy. And what does that look like to you? My mother asked, a hint of her usual calculation returning to her voice. It means no more financial support without clear boundaries and expectations, I said firmly. If, and this is a big if, I ever help financially again, it would be under specific conditions. What conditions? Jason asked, suddenly interested. First, you both need financial counseling. Real counseling, not just a one-time budget session. Second, Jason needs stable, full-time employment with at least 6 months of consistent work history. Third, any money provided would be a formal loan with documentation and repayment terms, not gifts or handouts. My mother's expression shifted between offense and consideration. And if we meet these conditions? Then I'd consider helping with specific, one-time needs, not ongoing expenses. For example, I might help with a security deposit on a more affordable apartment, but not monthly rent payments. Jason stood abruptly. This is bullshit. She's power tripping because she finally has money and a boyfriend who filled her head with ideas about how terrible we are. Sit down, Jason, my mother snapped with unexpected authority. He looked surprised but complied. She turned back to me. Your father doesn't know we're here. He's at a job interview, a better position at another insurance company. The commute would be longer, but the salary is almost $20,000 more than he makes now. This was news to me. That's great, I said sincerely. He's been applying everywhere, she continued. He's had 3 interviews this month. And I've taken on more hours at the office, plus weekends at Macy's. I've noticed, I admitted. That's positive progress. We're trying, she said, and for once, the vulnerability in her voice seemed genuine. We didn't realize how dependent we'd become on your help until it wasn't there anymore. And I'm proud of the steps you're taking, I told her. That's exactly what I hoped would happen, that you'd find your own financial footing. By losing our home? Jason interjected bitterly. The home was never sustainable on their income, I replied evenly. That's not my fault, Jason. My mother rubbed her temples, looking suddenly older than her 57 years. What about the house? Is there anything you can do? We've lived there for 28 years. The appeal to sentimentality was familiar manipulation, but the desperation behind it was real. I considered my prepared response to this inevitable question. I won't pay off the mortgage or take over payments again, I said firmly. But I might be willing to help with 1 month's payment to give you time to find a more affordable living situation, if you agree to work with a financial counselor I recommend. Hope flickered across my mother's face. You would do that? With a formal agreement in place, yes. The help would be limited and conditional. Jason scoffed. So we have to sign contracts now? Like we're strangers? No, I corrected him. Like we're adults respecting each other's boundaries. My mother placed a restraining hand on Jason's arm before he could respond. We'll consider it, she said, with uncharacteristic restraint. Your father and I need to discuss options. Jason shook off her hand and stood again. This is ridiculous. I'm out of here. He walked to the door without another word and left, the door closing with more force than necessary behind him. My mother sighed. He's taking this hard. He had to move back home, and his hours at Target were cut last week. That's unfortunate, I said, not offering the immediate financial solution she might have expected previously. There are lots of places hiring right now. She nodded slowly, seeming to accept this new reality. Your father's been asking about you. He feels terrible about Thanksgiving. He could have called me himself, I pointed out. You know how he is, she said, as though his avoidance of difficult conversations was a charming quirk rather than a significant problem. But he misses you. I miss aspects of our family too, I admitted. But not the financial pressure or guilt trips. She was quiet for a moment. I never saw it as pressure. I thought you were happy to help. Did you ever ask if I was happy to help? I challenged gently. Or if the amount was sustainable for me? Or what dreams of my own I was putting aside? Her silence was answer enough. I should go, she finally said, gathering her purse. Jason's probably waiting in the car, fuming. I walked her to the door. As she stepped into the hallway, she turned back. The financial counselor, do you have someone in mind? I do, I confirmed. I'll email you their information. She nodded, then hesitated. Haley, this isn't easy for me to say, but I'm sorry. Not for needing help, we really did need it, but for taking it for granted. For never saying thank you. For making you feel like an ATM instead of a daughter. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement of the dysfunction, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from her. For the first time in our confrontation, I felt a genuine connection. Thank you for saying that, I replied softly. She gave a tight smile and walked toward the elevator. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The conversation had gone better than I'd feared but worse than I'd hoped, much like most interactions with my family. Michael returned 20 minutes later, grocery bags in hand. His expression turned concerned when he saw me sitting quietly on the couch. Everything okay? My mother and Jason stopped by, I explained, helping him unpack the groceries. Wow. How did that go? I recounted the conversation as we prepared dinner together, his steady presence a reminder of how healthy relationships could feel. That evening, I received a text from my father. Your mother told me about her visit. I've been a coward not reaching out myself. I'm sorry, Haley. Not just for Thanksgiving but for years of letting you carry us. I have an interview tomorrow that looks promising. Would you be willing to talk sometime this week? It was the most direct communication we'd had in months, possibly years. Later that night, I drafted emails to both my parents with the contact information for a financial counselor who specialized in families recovering from financial crises. I also outlined my offer regarding the single mortgage payment, with clear conditions and expectations. Then I sent a separate email to Jason. I understand you're angry. I would be too if my financial safety net disappeared. But you're capable of supporting yourself, you've just never had to before. I'm including the same financial counselor's information I sent Mom and Dad. If you commit to the process, I'm open to discussing a one-time contribution toward education or job training. Not another business venture, but something that builds employable skills. Think about it. Over the next 2 weeks, significant changes unfolded. My father accepted the new insurance position with the higher salary. My parents scheduled an initial consultation with the financial counselor. They listed several valuable items for sale to help with immediate expenses. With my one-time mortgage assistance, provided via formal agreement, they gained enough breathing room to find a small rental condo within their actual budget. Jason, after initially rejecting my email, grudgingly attended a financial counseling session and enrolled in a coding boot camp with flexible evening hours around his retail schedule. 6 months after our confrontation, my parents invited me to Thanksgiving again, this time at their new, modest condo. The invitation came with an acknowledgement of past mistakes and an assurance that no financial discussions would occur during the holiday. After careful consideration and discussion with both Michael and Dr. Rivera, I accepted. 1 year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I stood outside my parents' condo, a bottle of wine in one hand, Michael's steady presence beside me. We'd been married for 3 months in a small ceremony that my parents and Jason had attended without drama, a minor miracle in itself. Ready? Michael asked, giving my hand a supportive squeeze. I nodded and knocked on the door, still feeling a mixture of apprehension and hope. My father answered, his appearance notably different from a year ago. He'd lost weight, and the perpetual worry lines on his forehead had softened. The new job with better pay but longer commute had unexpectedly improved his health. He was using the train time to read and listen to podcasts rather than sitting in traffic, and had joined a walking group with colleagues during lunch breaks. Haley! Michael! Come in, he greeted us with genuine warmth, taking our coats and the wine. The condo was modest compared to their previous house. About half the square footage, but felt cozy rather than cramped. My mother had always had a talent for decorating, and she'd made the space feel both elegant and comfortable with careful furniture selection and strategic use of color. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Like my father, she looked different, her designer clothes replaced with more practical but still stylish options, her previously highlighted hair now its natural silver-streaked brown. You made it, she said, embracing me with unexpected emotion. The place looks nice, doesn't it? Much easier to clean than the old house. This acknowledgement of the benefits of downsizing, rather than lamenting what they'd lost, marked significant progress. Jason arrived 20 minutes later. His transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. The formerly perpetually unemployed entrepreneur now worked full-time as a junior programmer after completing the coding boot camp I'd helped fund. He'd moved into a shared apartment with 2 other boot camp graduates and was slowly building savings for the first time in his adult life. Hey, he greeted me with awkward formality. Our relationship remained the most strained, but the open hostility had faded. The program you're in sounds interesting, I offered as we sat in the living room before dinner. How do you like it? It's actually pretty cool, he admitted, animation entering his voice as he described a project he was working on. The senior devs aren't as impressed with my innovative approaches as I'd like, but my team lead says I'm making good progress for someone 6 months in. The ability to receive feedback without spiraling into defensiveness represented enormous growth for my brother. Dinner itself was simpler than the elaborate spreads of previous years, but no less delicious. My mother had focused on a few well-executed dishes rather than an excessive feast for 4 people. We ate at their small dining table, the conversation flowing more naturally than I could remember in years. I'm eligible for a promotion next quarter, my father mentioned as he served himself a modest portion of mashed potatoes. The regional manager position. It would mean overseeing 5 offices. That's fantastic, I responded, genuinely happy for him. Do you feel ready for that level of responsibility? I think so, he said thoughtfully. The management training program has been eye-opening. I realize now I've been coasting for years, afraid to take on more because it seemed easier to just maintain the status quo. The self-awareness in this statement was striking. The financial counseling helped with that too, my mother added, surprising me. Lisa, our counselor, pointed out how we were applying the same avoidance to our finances as we were to other aspects of life. How many sessions did you end up doing with her? I asked. We're still going, my father replied. Monthly now instead of weekly. She's helping us plan for retirement, something we should have started seriously 20 years ago. Better late than never, Michael offered supportively. Exactly, my mother agreed. We've had to adjust our expectations. We won't be spending winters in Florida like we once planned, but we should be able to retire modestly if your father gets this promotion and we both work another 10 years. The absence of any hint that I might fund their retirement was noticeable and refreshing. After dinner, as Michael helped my father with dishes, my mother pulled me aside. I have something for you, she said, retrieving an envelope from a drawer. It's not much, but it's a start. Inside was a check for $1,200 and a handwritten note, first repayment. Thank you for everything. Love, Mom and Dad. The amount was tiny compared to what I'd given them over the years, but the gesture itself was meaningful. We've set up a separate savings account, she explained. Every month, we put aside what we can. Some months it's only $50, but we're committed to repaying you, even if it takes years. I never expected repayment, I said truthfully. We know. That's why it's important to us to do it anyway. She hesitated, then continued, the counseling helped us see how we'd been taking advantage of your generosity. It wasn't intentional, at least not consciously, but that doesn't make it right. This acknowledgement, more than the check, represented the healing I'd hoped for but hadn't dared expect. Later, as Jason and I found ourselves momentarily alone on the small balcony, he awkwardly cleared his throat. So, I'm up for a promotion too. Junior developer too. Small raise, but it's something. That's great, I said sincerely. You've really committed to this path. He shrugged, looking out at the modest view. Didn't have much choice after you cut me off. I waited, sensing there was more. But, he continued after a moment, it's actually not terrible. Having a regular paycheck, building something, being part of a team. He glanced at me. I still have ideas for startups, but I'm learning the technical side first. Maybe in a few years, when I have actual skills and some savings. That sounds like a solid plan, I agreed, noting the dramatic shift from his previous approach of jumping into ventures with no preparation or realistic funding strategy. I'm sorry about all the money, he said abruptly. I didn't realize how much it was adding up to. And I was a real jerk about it. You were, I confirmed, not sugarcoating it. But you're making different choices now. Yeah. He fidgeted with his watch, not the expensive Apple Watch from last year, but a simple Timex. Anyway, I'm trying. It wasn't an elaborate apology, but coming from Jason, it was significant. As Michael and I drove home that evening, I reflected on the profound changes the past year had brought. They're really different, Michael observed. All of them. They are, I agreed. I never expected this level of transformation, to be honest. You gave them the opportunity to rise to the occasion by not rescuing them, he pointed out. Most people will meet the expectations set for them, whether high or low. The year had brought changes for me as well. Beyond the external milestones, my promotion to executive vice president, our wedding, our new home, the internal shifts were even more significant. I no longer felt responsible for my family's financial well-being. I'd stopped feeling guilty about spending money on myself. I'd learned to recognize the difference between genuine helping and enabling dependency. Most importantly, I'd discovered that love and financial support were not the same thing. I could love my family without bankrolling them. They could love me without viewing me as an ATM. This distinction had transformed our relationships into something healthier than they'd ever been. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of excruciating guilt as I watched my family struggle, times when I questioned my decision, nights spent wondering if I'd been too harsh. But seeing them now, taking responsibility, making progress, building sustainable lives, confirmed that the painful process had been necessary. Financial boundaries, I realized, weren't just about money. They were about respect, autonomy, and healthy relationships. By establishing those boundaries, I hadn't just protected my bank account, I'd created space for genuine connection based on mutual respect rather than dependency and obligation. As Michael and I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the many people trapped in financially unhealthy family dynamics, afraid to set boundaries for fear of being seen as selfish or uncaring. I thought about how freeing it had been to finally say no after years of automatic yes, and how that freedom had ultimately benefited everyone involved. The healing wasn't complete. There were still occasional awkward moments, flashes of old resentments, adjustments to our new dynamic. But we were moving forward on healthier footing than I'd ever thought possible. When my phone chimed with a text, I expected it to be my mother with another "thank you for coming." Instead, it was Jason, "Thanks for not giving up on me entirely. Working on paying you back too. Starting small, but it's something." Attached was a receipt for a $100 transfer to my account, a token amount but symbolically significant. Financial healing, like emotional healing, would take time. But for the first time, I believed it was possible. The journey from enabler to boundary setter had been the hardest road I'd ever traveled, but standing on the other side, I wouldn't trade the difficult path for the comfortable prison I'd lived in before. By finally saying you're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize? Then I'm cutting off every dollar you lived on. I hadn't just changed my family's financial reality, I'd transformed our entire relationship dynamic for the better. Have you ever had to set difficult financial boundaries with loved ones? How did it affect your relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the challenging but necessary journey of setting boundaries and creating healthier relationships. Remember, sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their own choices. Thank you for watching, and may you find the courage to set the boundaries you need in your own life.